In today's show, Sean Highkin of the Rose Garden Report returns, and we talk about the youngsters on the Blazers roster. That's Shaedon Sharpe, that's Scoot Henderson, Nazir Little, Jabari Walker, and more. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. We're 3 days a week in August, so make sure you're checking out your feeds and listening to it. We're trying to go Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Last week we failed because I was out of town briefly, but as you're listening to this episode, I'm out of town again, baby. But through the magic of recording, Sean Highkin is here joining us for another episode. Sean was on Friday's episode, kind enough to stick around for Monday. Sean, how you doing?
I'm good. Dame's going to get traded over the weekend, and then
100% chance. I've been predicting
just because you've been banking episodes so you can go on vacation. Dame is going to get traded 30 minutes after one of your episodes goes up.
Yeah, no, even worse than this. This is my this is our wedding anniversary, and so I'm not taking any of my stuff with me because it's like I'm just trying to be a good partner and good, it's like, so I'm not taking no microphone, no computers, no nothing. So I'm going to be away, truly away from all of this. 100% chance Damian Lillard gets traded this weekend. Not 100%, but high, very high. It's never been higher than when I have planned to leave.
Just because you're going on vacation. We should have probably factored. On the last episode we recorded, we did our predictions of how this is going to go, and neither of us predicted it's going to happen this weekend. If I had known that you were leaving just for your wedding anniversary, I would have said, "Oh, he's for sure getting traded this weekend."
Yeah, I kept that under wraps until today's show, but so I'm not here. So if it does happen and you're listening to this and it feels outdated, I'll probably have deleted it from using the magic of my cell phone. But if you are hearing this, it's because Damian Lillard is still on the team. As Sean just alluded to, in the podcast in your feeds from Friday's show, that is August 5th's show. Is that right? August 4th show, excuse me.
Yeah.
Sean joined us. We talked all about the Damian Lillard drama, all about the saga, all about what we think is going to happen and where kind of we are. But in today's show, I want to switch gears. The Blazers are every signal they have given is the rebuild is upon us. They are going young one way or another. And I think lost in the Dame stuff a little bit, not by true optimists out there, but a little bit is I think the Blazers are in a pretty fun spot. I think if they could find a resolution with the Dame thing that is palatable, they're going to be a team that's easy to root for. I'm pretty excited about Scoot Henderson. I think he's going to be very good. You got to see him up close and personal for 21 whole minutes in Vegas. I saw you on TV. You had great seats. What were your impressions in those 21 minutes of young Scoot?
Well, he looks awesome in those 21 minutes, and everybody that I've talked to about him and everything I've read and everything I've watched, I mean, yeah, they're in a pretty good spot as far as a starting point. Now, when you say, once Dame is traded, they're in a fun spot. I don't think that's the same thing as them being in a good spot. They're going to be a 26, 27 win team at most the next couple of years.
I mean, they are almost certainly going to be in the running for worst team in the NBA.
Yeah.
They're not. But that's fine.
Honestly, I'm not mad at it. I am kind of excited about covering a 27-win team with no expectations, and you just get to watch Scoot. It's after I'll take that over what the last couple of years have been, where you start out with all these expectations, and then by the middle of the season, all their good players are shut down, and they're pulling G League guys off the street, and these games are just completely pointless. And then everybody's speculating about oh, well, is Dame going to be happy with another year of a completely clean
the
slate?
To that speculation
well, right,
question.
We clearly found that out, but a completely clean slate, especially with the lottery going the way that it did with them, and also the draft going the way that it did, because I think Brandon Miller's going to be fine.
Yeah.
But you're a lot less excited about this new era if it's him than if it's Scoot.
For me, for sure. I know a friend of the program, Raphael Barlow, who's literally a professional NBA draft scout. He was the only one I know who was consistently Brandon Miller 2, Scoot 3. Everybody, like, legitimate friend of the show. He'll probably be back on here in the near future, and I'll tease him when he gets on here. But pretty much everyone else said Scoot is the second best player in this draft. And in other, even in other situations, he may have gone number 1 overall, et cetera, et cetera. So it is, it's, I think I think Scoot is going to be darn good. I think he's going to be in the conversation for Rookie of the Year, but
just because like Wemby's going to get load managed, basically, is that?
Yeah, Wemby's going to play 65 games. I think Amen Thompson looked awesome in Vegas. I'm a huge
fan of the Twins. Yeah.
Yeah, he looked awesome. But they also have they have older folks ahead of him, Dylan Brooks and Van Vliet. So like he's maybe not going to get the Rookie of the Year is a lot about minutes and opportunity. Scoot's got that minutes and opportunity.
Yeah.
Maybe Asar Thompson in Detroit could be someone who does it. But to me, I think Scoot's going to be right up there in like a dude who wins hardware.
It could be like honestly Dame's Rookie Year where clearly everybody knew from day one the best player in that draft and the best long-term guy in that draft was going to be Anthony Davis. But it takes longer for big men to get used to the NBA level than it does for guys like Dame, you know what I mean? Like I could see it being like, yes, obviously Wemby is the better player and is going to have the better career, but Scoot might have the better rookie season just because it's easier for guys like him to adjust to the NBA than it is for guys.
And Rookie of the Year doesn't always account for like the things that we just, once you hit year 3 or whatever, everyone's just screaming about efficiency and jump shots and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And like Rookie of the Year, you're allowed to be like an inefficient volume scorer. And that's like totally cool. And Scoot might be an inefficient volume scorer and it'll be totally cool. Like his pick and roll feel is really fun. He's a willing passer. He might not have that sort of Russell Westbrook top 0.001% all-time athleticism, but he's a really fun athlete. He's like, I'm like you said, like, I think they're in a fun spot, not a good spot. And I think Scoot is for me, the top of the list at like fun, but maybe not good yet. Even the best rookies, like John Morant was so good as a rookie. He was like a net negative because it's hard for rookies to be positive contributors in the league.
Basically it's like how many rookie point guards can you look at and say, this guy was an impact winning player right away? I think Dame was one. I think Derrick Rose was one. I think Chris Paul was one. If you want to count Luka, even though Luka's like bigger for a point, if you want to count Luka,
what position does he play?
If you throw out Luka, I'm basically looking at I'm looking at Dame, I'm looking at Derrick Rose, I'm looking at Chris Paul from the last like 20 years.
So
it's not that many guys.
Yeah. First ballot Hall of Famer, league MVP. Derrick Rose probably ended up making the Hall of Fame, weirdly enough, but he's well liked. I'll put it like that.
Yes.
Chris Paul, first ballot Hall of Famer, league MVP, first ballot Hall of Famer. Like it's a short list of folks who are pretty. Yeah, and Scoot. Yeah, I'm not putting that mantle on him or whatever, but certainly I think the opportunity is there for him. Do you think he'll start right? Like assuming that Dame's not there, you think he's their starting point guard day one?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's Scoot and Ant, and then Shaedon off the bench at least at first. That would be my guess.
Yeah, with Matisse Thybulle at the 3, I would guess.
That would also be my guess. Is that Matisse would start at the 3? I've heard some stuff like, maybe they play around with the idea of putting Shaedon at the 3. I think they'll just because of the lack of depth at pretty much every position besides guard, they're gonna have to mix and match and do some of that stuff. Like I think Nasir Little is kind of overlooked in this stuff. If he can stay healthy for an extended amount of time, which has always kind of been the issue with him throughout his whole career, he could get in the mix there. Like I think Chris Murray, who they just drafted, the idea with him taking him at 23 was that he's going to be like pretty plug and play and he'd be able to actually contribute from day one. So they're going to have options. If I had to handicap it again, we're 2 months away from the start of training camp when we're recording this. My guess today, assuming that Dame is traded and is not part of the team on opening night, is that their starting lineup will be Scoot, Ant, Matisse, Jeremy, and this is the other thing I don't even think
the Nurk thing is so questionable.
We didn't get to this in the. I mean, if Nurk is here, he'll be a starter. My assumption has been from the beginning that whatever the Dame trade is, Nurk's salary and getting that off your books is going to be part of it. But
Yeah.
I've also thought it was a lock that Nurk was going to get traded the last 2 trade deadlines in a row, and it did not happen. So I'm kind of out of the predicting Nurk is going to be traded business until further.
Yeah,
notice.
no, have retired from that game. Yeah, no, Nurk is the big question, right? Like, obviously, I don't think they want Nurk to be involved in the next iteration of this team, but there is some value, and I've made this case before. If you're choosing between keep like a crappy deal for Nurk or just like keeping him around for this season and taking a crappy deal down the line, I would probably rather have Nurk, because your other options, the drop off to who else is going to be like a 30-minute a night center in the league is pretty brutal. And you can experience that in the 17 games Nurk is guaranteed to miss this season. So like you can just go ahead and like run that experiment. Let's talk Shaedon Sharpe, because I think we're both pretty high on Scoot. I want to ask you about Shaedon Sharpe in the second segment. Listeners, join us there, won't you? Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. And it's football season. FanDuel's giving you a chance to win all season long, because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. That's right. Pick a winner of the big game in February, and then each win they tally along the way in the regular season. FanDuel is going to give you bonus bets for each and every one of them W's. You can use your bonus bets on things like spreads, on player props, on over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sports book. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. All right. Still chatting with Sean Highkin of Rose Garden Reports. We talked Scoot Henderson. Me and you are believers. I think there was a time last year when Shaedon Sharpe was had probably taken the mantle as the most exciting player on this team. Maybe Scoot has passed him now, but what are your expectations for Shaedon in year 2, Sean?
I think what you expect out of him is going to come down a lot to how he looks on the defensive end. Because, like, I think the shooting is legit. I think the shooting is going to be there. We know what kind of athlete he is. We know what he does as far as rim pressure. He's going to have to be more consistent defensively. And I think to his credit, he started looking a lot more comfortable on that end of the floor towards the end of the year. And this is something that, from the beginning of training camp, like he was such an enigma to all of us because nobody saw him play coming into the draft because he didn't actually play at Kentucky. And then he gets hurt 5 minutes into his first summer league game. So going into training camp and going into the preseason, most of us hadn't really seen him. And one of the things that Chauncey and Dame have both, talked about with Shaedon is that he comes in early on. If he doesn't know one of the sets, you explain it to him once and then he's just got it. Like, you don't need to explain stuff to him multiple times. It just clicks for him. And I think the other thing is that over the course of the season, it's not even just like the, being more comfortable with NBA sets and, getting used to the physicality, because for him, because he didn't actually play at Kentucky and didn't play at the college level, he basically jumped from playing against high school competition to being in the NBA. And so I think the physical part of it was part of it, but I think there was also an element of he hadn't gone through like a season in college where like, this is how hard you have to work. This is how much extra film you have to watch. And I think that's something that he picked up, because I think early on during the season, there was some talk that like, is he just one of these guys that's like so physically talented but doesn't love the game? Is it just so easy for him that he's not going to put in the extra work? I did hear over the course of the season that it kind of gradually started to set in for him. Okay, this is what I have to do in order to get to the level that I want to get to, and now I'm willing to put in the work. I will say this, and I think this is an encouraging sign. Him playing Summer League this year, going into year 2, that was his decision. They weren't going to make him play. I had kind of talked to people, in the organization about it, and they said, we might have him play 1 or 2 games just to do it and then shut him down. But apparently, I think he said this at exit interviews when he was meeting with the front office and talking about like their expectations. He said to them, like, no, I want to play Summer League. I want to actually go be out there and get better. And I think the fact that he went to them and said, I want to play Summer League, even though, most second-year guys, especially guys who were top 10 lottery picks, could very easily, have the excuse to not play Summer League because they just don't feel like it. I think the fact that he proactively said, no, I want to do this, I think that's an encouraging sign for some of that side of it that maybe there were questions about early on with him. I think that a lot of that stuff is something you can look at as encouraging.
Yeah, I think people still think he might be too cool. I think that's a concern people have.
Well, it's a Tracy McGrady thing where like Tracy McGrady, for his entire career, he looked like he was like sleepwalking through everything just because he had such like a calm like demeanor with like his facial expressions that like didn't really change. And you, by the way, you kind of saw that change a little bit this year at Summer League in that first game. He dunks on, I think it was either Cam Whitmore or Jabari Smith. I forget who it was, but I
think it was Cam, yeah.
It was Cam Whitmore. And then he was like talking to him, and I was like, well, okay, we never saw that from him last year. So if he's coming out of, and honestly, you kind of started to see this with like from a media standpoint too. Like early on last year, I don't remember if you were at those pre-draft workouts or not before the 2022 draft.
No, I missed those.
And even like his early press conference, like after he
he rocked me at media day. I tried to get something out of him.
Yeah, you were at media day. That's right. It's just two word answers. He's still not a good quote unquote. He's like still not a good quote, but he's definitely started to come out of his shell a little bit more. And I think going into year 2, part of it, especially if like Dame is gone and now he has to take more of a leadership mantle, I think, there's reason to believe that maybe he's a little bit more ready for something like that than he was going into his rookie season.
Yeah, I think the talk, your point about the mental preparation stuff, like how to be a pro, is a thing that people totally underrate about the rookie transition. It's not just basketball and the language and the speed and all that stuff. It's like, what do I do if we play Tuesday and Thursday? What do I do on Wednesday to get my body right, to get my mind right, to be ready to go? Because on Friday we leave, on Saturday we play, on Sunday we try. It's like, it is relentless. And if you don't have a routine and a rhythm and here's when I watch film and here's where I get a little bit of extra side work, and here's days I don't get side work because I need to rest. Like,
this is what I have to eat at this specific time, or this,
right.
Like, we have like chefs on staff that make sure guys are eating the right things, or like, these are the days. And this is something Dame has actually talked about too, coming back from, his injury, was like, there are some days where it's better to not work out to give your body a chance to recover.
Especially when
that's the kind of stuff you learn when you're a pro that maybe you didn't know when you were playing AAU or playing in high school. And it's all that kind of stuff. And I think, you talk to Anthony Simons, who also, early on had kind of some of the same, like, oh, is he really putting in all the extra work that he needs to put in? Eventually that stuff all clicked for him. And I think there's reason to believe that is clicking for Shaedon now.
What do you make, just because you mentioned Simons, what do you make of their, like, 3-guard situation? Obviously, I think we both think that Ant is going to start, but it does feel like, are we doing this again with like, playing Anthony Simons again at shooting guard? Is like, this is the same thing we've seen a bunch. What do you kind of make of that rotation and how it might or could shake out?
The fact that Shaedon is bigger than Norman Powell makes it a little bit more palatable to me, but it's
he's 20. Yeah.
It's still not an idea. No, I'm just talking about as far as like a size and skill set thing. And also the other thing also is that Scoot and Simons are not nearly as similar of players as Dame and Simons are. Like, they're very different. Like, it's a little bit less overlapping skill sets than like the Dame CJ thing was, or the Dame Ant thing was. I don't know how good they're going to be necessarily, because like we were talking about, they're probably going to be a 27-win team for the next couple of years at least. But the skill sets of the guys that we're talking about here are a little bit less duplicating of each other than maybe it was under the previous iteration of this.
Yeah, I worry, not worry. I think it's been pretty obvious that the good teams in the league have plus length at shooting guard, small forward, and power forward. I think that's just like the good teams are bigger in the middle of the lineup. You can get away with it being a little smaller at the 5, sort of, unless you have to play against the champs. Like, I just think the future of this team is Shaedon Sharpe playing shooting guard at some point. I don't know. I don't think you have to solve that Anthony Simons thing like now. I think there are some fans.
They're going to be bad this year no matter what. Yeah. Like, and by the way, like we were talking in the Dame episode about like Tyler Hero doesn't have a ton of trade value. I don't think Ant has a ton of trade value either.
No, I don't think that arc. Yeah,
they're like similar types. You can land wherever you want to land on which one you think is better than the other, but that similar type of player in that similar type of age range on that similar type of contract, like that, you're gonna be bad no matter what. So it's like it's not like you because if they could have traded Ant for like OG Anunoby or something like that, then they would have done that, and we wouldn't be having this conversation because Dame wouldn't be asking out.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. I think that archetype of like not quite a point guard, defensive issues or defensive struggles, score first, two guard. Mostly those guys' production outweighs their trade value. It's like Tyler Hero's pretty good. Anthony Simon's pretty good.
You can find guys like, maybe not quite as good, but you can find guys like that. Not very. It's pretty easy.
It is easier. Scoring is both the most valuable skill because scoring matters, but it's also the skill that you can duplicate. You can find at other parts of the of up and down the roster, one way or another. Okay, let's close the show. I want to ask you about everybody else that isn't the three guards, because you mentioned Nazir Little and Chris Murray a little bit. I want to ask you sort of how you think those pieces fit, albeit with a incomplete roster. Let's talk about that to close the show. Join us in the third segment, won't you? Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Still chatting with Sean Highkin of the Rose Garden Report. So I think we kind of both have the same guess for the starting lineup. That means Shaedon Sharpe is your sixth man. I think the top six is pretty much a lock. How do the other pieces fit? And we can go through them one by one. If we're going to get a little bit of Matisse Thybulle at small forward and a little bit of Shaedon Sharpe playing some small forward and moving down to the two, where does someone like Nazir Little fit into the rotation? Is he a guaranteed night one contributor? Or, I mean, I think he is, but like, what is his level of, where do you see his sort of level of contributions early? Obviously, asterisk, we have no idea how the Damian Lillard situation plays out as of right now.
Well, the thing with Nasir, and this has been the thing the whole time with him, is can he stay healthy? And this kind of went under the radar, but after this past season ended, he had, because remember last summer, he had the shoulder surgery that was like why he missed most of the season, but then he also had the same core surgery that Dame had. He had that on one side, and then this past year, like right after the season ended, he had the same core surgery on the other side. Okay. I don't know if you remember that, but they sent this press release.
I remember the press release. Release.
Yeah. So. And I don't think that's a very serious thing. Like, he came back from that fine last year. Like, that's not, unless you're Gary Payton, that's, like, not an injury that, like, it lingers and is, like, hard to come back from. But if he's healthy, I think there is a real chance for him to earn minutes just because the wing is such a weak point for them. Like, they have the backcourt, they've got the guard, like, that's taken care of. They have no front court depth, and then also, like, their wing depth, like, they also, I would guess today, August 2nd, 2 months before the start of training camp, I would guess that Matisse Thybulle probably starts with a 3, but I could also see that being a similar situation to last year, because remember, going into last training camp, the question was, who's going to start at the 3? Is it going to be Nasir Little, or is it going to be Josh Hart? I think going into it, most of us thought, and maybe we should have taken the health thing into account, but, like, Nasir was, at the time, remember, like, he hadn't gotten his contract extension yet, so that was, and he admitted that later, that it was, like, weighing on him mentally, and that was kind of distracting to him, and that interfered with how he played during the preseason and during camp, and then he was also physically still getting back to where he was before the shoulder injury that he had during the season before that. So if he comes into camp before, with physically he's totally right. Now he's got his contract, he's got his money, he doesn't have to think about like his future or his job security or whatever. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that he comes in and wins the starting small forward spot in training camp.
Yeah, I think that's fair. He was way worse than Josh Hart, so I think even when we were doing this last year, it was like,
and that was again because A, he was stressed out about his contract extension, and B, because he was still like physically getting back from the shoulder injury. So like,
and Josh Hart's just way better than him.
Yes, well, yes, I think size wise, if Nasir had been better, that's who they would have liked, and that's why I think he's got a shot here too. Like, I don't know. I think it's up in the air. I would give the edge again 2 months before camp starts. These are questions that get answered in October and not in August. Yeah. As of right now, my prediction is that the opening night starter at small forward is Matisse Thybulle, but I don't think that's like 100% lock set in stone by any means.
And the gap, the difference just in terms of like overall talent, the gap between Josh and Naz is not the same as the gap between Matisse and Naz. Correct. Matisse has too many questions on offense to be a stone cold lock.
I would agree.
But he's a really good defensive player. He's a really good defensive player.
I would agree.
What about the youngsters? Like the Blazers don't have back. Obviously, they're going to have to do something at center, so we can just kind of ignore that because we don't even know what the deal is with Nurk. But like,
I am very intrigued by Ibu Baji, by the way. I know he's still like he's in the Bruno Caboclo 2 years away from being 2 years away category, and I think he's going to get a lot of minutes with the Rip City remix.
He's going to be a Mixers legend. I'm definitely going to go check him out.
Yeah. So, I'm actually intrigued by him, but like, is he actually right now ready to be a good NBA player? No, absolutely not.
Yeah, here's the thing. Like, if they're one of the worst teams in the league, it doesn't really matter if Ibu Baji plays 15 minutes a night. Like, that's totally fine. But I don't think they're going to do that from night one.
No.
Like, they might end up there, but I don't think they'll do that from... I think that's something you do after Christmas, right?
Right.
Yeah, you hit the new year and you're like, yeah, well, we're 40 games into this thing and we are not good. And we're totally okay with that. So let's do something a little bit different. But I don't think they'll do that right away. But at power forward, they got Jeremy Grant, who just had a great summer. What a great summer for Jeremy Grant. Get the bag. Now. Yeah, get the bag. Get a kid. What a freaking weekend, or what a freaking offseason. I mean, freaking weekend is just in my brain. I apologize to everyone. Where did Jabari Walker and Chris Murray fit? I think both of them are sort of interchangeably 3s and 4s, but I don't think both of them play. Where do you kind of lean with those two gentlemen heading into the early part of the season?
I mean, you'd give the edge, I would think, to Jabari Walker just off of seniority. I think they were similar types of draft picks in the sense that, like, in the lottery, they went with the super high upside Shaedon Sharpe, Scoot Henderson, and then in their, back end of the, like, in Jabari Walker's case, it was like the end of the second round, and then in Chris Murray's case, it was like the middle of the first round, like late, post-lottery. You went for the guy that is a little bit more of like a plug and play. You can play him, maybe older college player, guy that, a little bit lower upside, but like a higher floor, low mistake type of guy. They really like Jabari Walker, and my understanding is that part of the reason that they decided to waive Trendon Watford before his guarantee date was, part of it was like the thing we talked about earlier about like wanting to keep roster spots open to,
make a trade with Miami
facilitate
Heat.
The Dame trade or whatever. But they view Jabari Walker and Trendon Watford as like pretty redundant skill-wise and positionally, and they think that Jabari Walker is a lot better, especially defensively. I think he definitely has more upside on defense. But the point is they really like Jabari Walker. They think he's gonna be really good. Like that.
Well, he is this regime's guy as opposed to Watford, who was the previous, signed out of prior to Neil getting axed.
Right.
But then Cronin, one of the first things he did was give Trent Watford a real contract.
To a real contract.
Certainly he liked Watford. And
Jabari had a really good summer league.
Yeah, he did.
So
he kind of early on in Jabari's rookie season, I thought he was going to end up being a contributor, but then by the middle of the year, he just wasn't. Couldn't shoot, and his decision making on offense is pretty rough.
But that's all. That's rookie stuff, though.
Yeah, of course. I was going to say
he's a really smart. He's a really smart guy and really self-aware. Like I think I've talked about this on here before. I know I've talked about it on my own show. I've talked about it before, but I was still so like when it clicked as soon as I realized early on with him having him last year at Summer League.
Such a good interview. Such a good talker, yeah.
Well, but also just the level of self-awareness that he had as a 19-year-old kid about, like, he comes in and says, like, and maybe part of this is that his dad was a 10-year NBA veteran who was never a go-to scorer, who taught him from a young age that you have to, be able to rebound and play defense and do other stuff to stay on the floor if you're never going to be, like, a 20-point scorer. And he came in, like, he was talking to us, like, after some of these summer league practices in Las Vegas about how people say I'm a role player, and I don't consider that an insult because you can make a lot of money being a role player. And I'm just like, 19-year-old kid is already calling himself a role player and saying that you can have a 10-year career being a role player. Like, okay, he's gonna be fine. He's gonna find a way to stick in the league for a long time.
Yeah, he was. I had him on the podcast right after he signed his contract, and he was great. I was like, I hope it works out for you because you are such a good, you're just a good.
He's so
dude to
thoughtful.
talk to.
He's so self-aware. Exactly. It's great. Yeah.
Chris Murray, you think if you had to guess, he's probably out of the rotation on night one and works his way in, or what do you think?
Well, the thing is, they just have no depth outside of the backcourt. Like,
right?
I guess it's like interchangeably like 3 or 4, but like also if you don't do anything new with the center position, if it's still just Nurk and then like Ibu Baji, you're gonna have to play Jabari at the 5. You're gonna have to play Jeremy at the 5, and that's gonna open up some minutes for somebody like. I think Chris Murray's in kind of a weird spot because I think he's too good to get minutes on the G League team.
Right.
But do they consistently have spots for him in the rotation? I don't know.
Well, I think the value of having the G League team be right in town, which is one of the big reasons that they emphasized it, is that they can send him to the G League on a Wednesday and have him be back later that night. And it's like, hey, go play because you're not going to play on, we have a game Friday night.
Get the reps in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, where you're probably not going to play.
I'm very curious, and this is a guy that is definitely going to be playing a lot of minutes with the Rip City remakes. I am very curious about Rayon Rupert.
Yeah.
I don't know much about him. He looked pretty rough at Summer League. You could see some of the it's one of those okay, he might take a year or two to become like an actual NBA rotation player, but I'm very intrigued by him.
Yeah, he's long and he's really competitive on defense. He looked particularly early in Summer League, the first couple games, he looked so bad on offense. It's like, he doesn't he can't dribble, he doesn't he's just didn't have it.
This is why it's good they've got a G League team now.
Yeah, exactly. Get him a bunch of minutes. So, yeah, I'm excited to watch our beloved mixers in action over at the Childs Center.
I live in North Portland, so it's very easy for me to get to that arena. So I plan to be there often this year.
Yeah, I mean, I also am a North Portland resident because, folks, if you live outside the city, that's where people like Sean and I can afford to live. All right, Sean, do you want to come back for one more episode? We'll play a game. How's that sound?
Let's do it, man.
All right, dear listeners, come back for Wednesday's show. Sean Highkin's going to be here, and we're going to play a game of over-under where I've got overs and unders to pitch to Sean. He's going to make picks. We'll talk about it. It's going to be fun. Come back and join us for Wednesday's show. In the meantime, tell your friends about the podcast. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.